Test.
Well, unfortunately, right after this, I have to go, killer. And then, well, then I have to go to. Rhino injury.
She was hit
No,
by-
we both. I had to go there. Check out somebody, I gotta keep it safe, so that's my primary.
Are they doing an emergency operations center?
Yeah, we have, yes. We have to. Three events after that, I have a. No, I know that, but yes, so.
I like it. Last thing.
Wow. Kid-
So it's running.
Yeah, yeah. One day, well, try to have some fun this morning.
Yes, I
Kind of
will.
like-
Right here.
Yeah, yeah, I think they are. Got one. Hi, are you Rachel?
Yes,
I'm Rachel. I'm moderating this morning, so I'll, yeah, put my questions to you, so.
See. So you right in there, so it's hard.
You know.
Yeah.
Director of volunteer.
Good morning.
I know I'm there, I get it about, the black, maybe Asian. I heard all about everyone. Then I go, they did it for free in the end.
Good morning. Thank you. All right, I think we have a few folks settling in, so I'll just stall for a little bit as folks find their seat. Hi, everybody. I'm Dwee. I'm the president of the U District Community Council, and I'm very excited to welcome all of you here today, and I'm very excited to have the candidates here today to talk about some issues that are really important to us in the Northeast Seattle neighborhoods. This event was a ton of work by a ton of people, and it really is for our neighbors, by our neighbors. All the coffee and pastries were donated by local businesses, and we had our local print shop print out flyers and outreach materials for us. The questions that we're going to be asking the candidates today are collected from our residents in the U District, in Roosevelt, with input from folks from View Ridge and Hawthorne Hills, and so really trying to center the questions and issues that we have in the Northeast Seattle neighborhoods. Before we move on, I just wanted to, thank the candidates again for taking time out of your busy schedule. Hopefully, after this event, you might have some time to mingle either in front of the building or take a walk through the farmers market, which is a little neighborhood gem for us. For the event today, we'll have Amy from KUOW, a local NPR affiliate, moderating for us. Amy covers government affairs and court issues, and when she's not chasing stories, she is attending operas and concerts around our Seattle art scene. So I'll pass it on to Amy to share a little bit about the program, the candidates, and then we'll just launch into the questions.
Great. Hi, good morning. Thank you so much. Thanks to the candidates and thanks to the audience for coming out to learn about the candidates as we head towards Election Day. And I think I was told that there are restrooms out the door to the right if anyone needs those during our program. So we're going to go to opening statements by the candidates now. And so, and then we're going to go to some questions. Some of our questions are for everyone, and some of our questions are going to be specific to your race. We tried to intersperse it so that nobody is going to be sitting back cooling their heels for too long. And then at the end, we'll round it out with some never have I evers to get a little sense of some of your highlights of your life experience. And then we'll go to closing statements. Connor is our timekeeper, and we're going to ask you to do a 60-second opening statement. Just introduce yourself, and bonus points if you can describe one of your favorite spots in Northeast Seattle, including the U District, Roosevelt, View Ridge, and Hawthorne Hills neighborhoods. Let us know what your connection is to this neighborhood where our work is based here, and I love this neighborhood too. So and then we're going to have our other more substantive questions, and those will be 90-second responses. So Sarah Nelson, do you want to start us off with an opening statement for 60 seconds? This one?
Oh, okay, sure. Sorry. Good morning, everybody. Hello. Hello, neighbors also. I live on the other side of I-5 by a couple blocks. My name is Sarah Nelson, and I'm running for re-election to the Seattle City Council to build on the progress that we've made in the past 4 years, and also to protect this city from the external threat that is Donald Trump, because I am the leader who's got the experience taking on the tough fights and winning them. I have led the charge on expanding access to addiction treatment. And that's important because you don't have to be in recovery to know that the fentanyl crisis is driving both our chronic homelessness and public safety challenges. And on the public safety front, I've been championing small businesses and trying to help them recover and also deal with some of the crime that's affecting their storefronts. The Storefront Repair Fund was a product of a roundtable discussion in my committee that Don Blakeney encouraged me to have. So in any case, there's a lot on our plates right now, and the stakes couldn't be higher. So I'm running to keep the forward momentum, and I look forward to your questions, and hopefully you'll be able to tell the contradictions in this race. I would say that the zip tie thingy at Cowan Park and the merry-go-round there are really Not to be missed in this area, part of town.
I think I'll do, does that mic work? Okay, thank you. All right.
Oh, maybe. Yes. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name's Dion Foster, and I'm running for Seattle City Council Position 9. I will start with maybe my favorite connection. I teach at the University of Washington. I have a master's in social work. I teach master's level social work students there. So I'll say Solstice Cafe, which backs up to our building, is one of my favorite spots. I see some head nods, great scones in there. So my background, I've been a nonprofit executive director. I ran a group called Washington Progress Alliance. I've been a policy advisor in City Hall in both the Office of Policy and Innovation and the CEO's Office of Seattle Public Utilities, which is a $1 billion utility part of the city's budget. And I decided to run for city council because I want to work on making our city more affordable and accessible for families like mine. I was able to purchase my home because I got down payment assistance. And I always say I've lived a lot of different lives in this city. 12 years ago, when I had my son, I was on Apple Health and using that to make ends meet. And then I've worked on passing statewide capital gains tax and progressive revenue to help make sure we have investments into childcare, early education, and schools. And I'm running for city council to build a city that works for working people. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alexis Mercedes Rink. I am a renter and someone who takes the bus to work every day. And I went from waiting tables next to the Space Needle to working on policy actually at the UW Tower to now serving you on Seattle City Council, fighting for a city that works for all of us and not just the ultra-wealthy few. And we had a record-breaking win last year. And in my short 11 months on council, I've been hard at work delivering on what the people sent me here to do. I've introduced and passed legislation to build more affordable housing. I've secured funding, legal defense funding for immigrant families to fight against Trump's cruel deportation agenda. And I've also introduced the Seattle Shield Initiative, which would lower taxes for our small businesses, giving them the much-needed relief they need, while asking our top 10% largest corporations to pay what they owe to make sure that we can backfill and fund the essential services that are under attack right now. But I'm brought to this work in the first place because of my upbringing. I am proudly raised by my grandparents, and that's because I was born to teenagers who were caught in the cycles of substance use disorder and homelessness. But I'm here today because of good public schools, my public library, and my community center. And I'm fighting for those resources every day on Seattle City Council.
My name's Rachel Savage. I'm running for Seattle City Council Position 8. This is an all-city position, so anybody in the city can vote for me. I've had a retail business in Capitol Hill on Broadway since 1998. And the reason I'm running is because the number one problem I see in our city is drug addiction, the fentanyl epidemic, and the severe mental illness epidemic, and the lack of law enforcement. This perfect storm, came to my doorstep. I no longer can hire employees. It's not safe or responsible to have them working on what I call the front line. And I have a plan, a practical plan, to solve the number one problem of our city, which is going to bring us prosperity and safety for all. Restore law enforcement by building our own Seattle City Jail. Then build a long-term residential treatment center for both the severely mentally ill, who I saw many just on my way here this morning, and the severely drug addicted, and begin to arrest for misdemeanor crimes. This is not out of cruelty, this is out of compassion. Once there's an arrest, then we can offer them either 364 days in jail or 364 days in a long-term treatment center where they'll get the treatment that they need.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Bruce Harrell, and so I went to Seattle Public Schools, went to Eckstein Middle School, actually, and to segue into my favorite area, it's actually Roosevelt High School. I actually wanted to go to Roosevelt. I had friends that had gone there. They had won the state championship with people like James Edwards and Gilbert Pettit and my friends, and so I am very fond of this area. Actually, we went to the Nutcracker just last year because I'm very fond of that school. I then went to the University of Washington on a football scholarship, and we beat Michigan in the Rose Bowl, who they're playing as we speak. What I learned in college, one of the things I did, and I met my wife here when we were students at the U, is if I became in a position of leadership, to lead with kindness, with thoughtfulness, but you have to be tenacious as well. These are big city challenges we're dealing with. And I've been elected several times in different responsibilities, but I ask you to look at my track record over I think 1,300 pieces of legislation, all designed to fight the powers that be for underrepresented communities. Oh, geez, I was just getting warmed up, and ask for your support. Look forward to the discussion. Here you go, Katie.
Okay. It's a little awkward. We're doing okay up here. Good morning. It's wonderful to be here. My name is Katie Wilson, and I am running for Seattle Mayor. I have been a community organizer and a coalition builder for the last 14 years here in Seattle, and I've decided to run for mayor because I believe that in this moment it is the best way that I can continue to advance the same things I've been fighting for my whole career, and that is making this city and our region a place where working families can thrive. Back in the day when I lived up in Phinney Ridge, I spent a lot of time in the U District, and there was a cafe next to where Grand Illusion used to be called Star Life on the Oasis, which was an amazing community cafe where there were lots of regulars, and I spent a lot of time hanging out there, so that's a special memory for me. I also used to work when I was doing odd jobs. I was working for a contractor who was working on an addition to a house in the View Ridge neighborhood, and this was in November, so it was a little cold, but it was wonderful arriving at that work site at 7 in the morning and watching the sunrise in the east from the second floor of the addition that we were building. So lots of memories in these neighborhoods.
We'll start at your end, Katie Wilson. So this is a question for all the candidates. It's a 90-second response, and we'll just make our way back down the line. These questions were written by the partner organizations who planned this event, so this is their concerns that they wanted to bring to you. And the first one concerns homelessness. They write, visible homelessness is a heartbreaking phenomenon all too common in Seattle. It exposes both the individuals living outside to street violence and the surrounding community to the frustrating impacts of someone needing to survive outside. We see this play out in our parks, such as University Playground in the U District or around Magnuson Park in Sandpoint. How would you make it easier for people camping in these parks to access housing and interventions for folks who seem resistant to moving inside?
Yeah, this is a great question. This is really one of the biggest reasons why I am running in this race. I remember, I've been doing this work for a long time. I remember back in 2015 when we first declared a civil state of emergency on homelessness in Seattle and King County. And since then, the crisis has only deepened. Over the last 4 years, we've seen more and more people sleeping unsheltered on our streets, thousands more than 4 years ago. And this is really one of my big disappointments in the approach of the current administration. There's been some really good coverage in the Seattle Times recently really showing that the city's current policy is to move people around to sweep encampments without providing meaningful offers of shelter and support. We have 2 homeless people on the street for every 1 shelter bed, so there's a cruel game of musical chairs going on. We need to urgently open more emergency housing and shelter around the city and get people inside with the support that they need. We know what works, and we know that the vast majority of folks sleeping outside will accept offers of emergency housing or shelter with services as long as those offers are appropriate to their situation. So during the pandemic, there was a model called Just Care that was pioneered by several nonprofits that was very successful at resolving encampments by getting the vast majority of people inside. That program was continued in the state right-of-way program. That is the approach that we need to take. Now, that's not to say that there won't be the occasional tough case of someone who does not accept help, but the vast majority of people, we can get them inside as long as we're creating those realistic pathways to housing and shelter with services.
Great. Mayor Harrell?
Sure. Thank you. If I asked all of you if you want to solve homelessness, every hand would go up. Every hand would go up. And if it were as easy as someone would think, it would be solved by now. Let me give you the statistics. In 2020, there were 2,078 shelter beds that the city funded. In 2025, there were 3,025. We've actually increased it. We spent $1 billion in affordable housing. This concept that we're moving people from A to B is just not true. If you look at 2023, we had over 2,204 accepted referrals into shelter. 50% of the people we've moved from shelter have gone into permanent supportive housing, and that is significantly above the county's average and the national average. My wife and I have been in this space for a long time. She used to be the CEO of United Way. On the city council, I was one of the champions for our Housing First policy. This is a complex issue. I have to remind folks that homelessness in the state has gone up. Homelessness in the country has gone up 18%. Homelessness in the county has gone up. This is a crisis. And everyone wants to solve it, and we have excellent people at the city trying to do this work. The answer has to be a regional approach. It continues to be. When I say that 70% of the people we're treating in Seattle did not become unhoused in Seattle, that is a fact. When I say that 85% of all of the tiny homes in the entire county are in Seattle, 63% of all of the shelter in the county are in the Seattle. Seattle cannot do it alone, and we have to understand that, but there is an answer to solving this through a regional approach that I will continue to push.
Thank you.
See, you got me in the middle here. Amy.
Okay, I disagree with the current policy on what's called homelessness. I don't believe it's a homeless problem. It's a drug problem. It's a severe mental illness problem. That's the problem we have. And what I know, I have 35 years of continuous abstinence from drugs. I used to be addicted to methamphetamine. I've had 35 years without, continuous. And in those 35 years, I've taught drug addicts how to not use drugs, how to deal with underlying issues once they're sober. That's the only way to do it, that cause them to want to use drugs, and then to teach them how to rebuild their lives and build a life worth living. We can do this, but not by giving drug addicts free apartments with no accountability to stay abstinent. And the severely mentally ill, they don't do well in the city on the streets. They don't do well in this housing where there's no real care. I mean, every single day I see schizophrenics living on the animal level, dirty, in psychosis, and I often see the same people over and over and over. We can do better. We can do better than tiny house villages. We can do better than sanctioned encampments. We can do better than this failed experiment of permanent supportive housing. It started in Utah, and it sounds compassionate, but it's not. If people can't take care of themselves because they're so severely addicted and so severely mentally ill, it's actually cruelty. And my opponent wants to continue it. I don't think you have permanent supportive housing in this lovely neighborhood here. But guess what? If she's elected, it'll be coming right to your doorstep. And in Capitol Hill, they moved 500 active drug addicts with no requirement for sobriety or abstinence to my neighborhood, and it's destroyed Capitol Hill. Take a drive through there today.
We're at time. And just a reminder, this question is especially if you could focus on people who seem resistant to accepting help.
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think it's important to center that we know that in a given day there are 16,000 people in our county that are experiencing homelessness, thousands of folks outside. And I think what's often missing from this conversation is that homelessness is the result of policy failures in multiple systems: our healthcare system, our behavioral health system, foster care, and our criminal legal system. And we need to be building in interventions across each of those systems to be preventing homelessness before it happens in the first place. We see warning signs in each of those systems that somebody's about to experience homelessness. A family is more likely to be at risk of experiencing homelessness if they're reaching out to the hospital about charity care. We know somebody's about to experience homelessness when they get behind on their utility payments. It's one of the biggest warning signs. So building in those interventions is particularly important. And I want to highlight University Heights in particular for doing their part in building in this interventions, because I know you all have the Safe Parking Program and have done that work to help build in that intervention and create a pathway for folks to start getting access to services. So I want to thank you Heights for your partnership and in doing your part, but we need more of those interventions and immediate ways for folks to start that process to get connected to systems of services. And I want to also highlight the State Right-of-Way Initiative. This is a state level program that is operated within City of Seattle where we have seen amazing data and results on getting folks to access those services, with over 90% of folks accepting those offers of housing. And then after 2 years of the program being operating, 72% of those folks remaining housed. We know programs that work that can resolve deeply entrenched encampments and get people housed. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll absolutely echo the need to continue making sure that we are making investments in prevention so that we can stop people from ending up on the streets in the first place. So I think that's excellent. Another thing that I really want to highlight when I think about this idea of people who are resistant to services or who have maybe declined services in the past is just noting why. So when we see some of those, when we see that data, what it shows us is that often it's because people are not able to get access to places where they can lock a door or places that are, as other folks have said, that are appropriate for them. So being able to focus on making investments in our system for solutions that are likely to have a higher uptake across the board. So in particular, that means non-congregate shelter, and that means, which is tiny homes are an example of that. So one action that I think the city can do is make sure that we are making it a simple and clear process through our permitting process, particularly looking at city-owned property. I live close to a site that actually a provider has been trying to bring on a tiny home village that would be actually clean and sober, and they've been working to bring that on for 2.5 years. And they've been going, and so making sure that we actually have the ability to look first at what property does the city own that's unused, and can we make a clear process and review our permitting process to try to get rid of those barriers so that we can actually then add capacity into our system so there are more places for people to go that are going to actually match with their needs.
All right, when I took office in 2022, I was shocked to learn that neither the city nor the county funded rehab, basic not in-person, but residential, long-term, a month-long rehab. The only drug addiction services that were provided was medication for opioid use disorder, which we need. That stabilizes people in active addiction, but it does nothing for the meth addict, for example, or the alcoholic, for example. And so that's why I put forward a pilot program, which is now going to be hopefully funded permanently in the budget, to help caseworkers get people directly into inpatient or intensive outpatient treatment, and then the city is billed later. Why is this important? Because homelessness advocates will tell you that people don't become homeless because of an addiction. They become addicted usually as a result of being homeless. And so therefore, we have a responsibility to break, as policymakers, to break that cycle. Not only is it inhumane to let people continue to live in inhumane conditions in our parks, we have got to help them move out of parks so that their cycle of addiction is broken. And we have a responsibility. We are, I would say, negligent if we do not. And so that is an extremely important thing. The difficulty is that people who are in active addiction have a hard time making sound decisions for themselves, and so therefore it comes down to ensuring that our outreach workers are assertively encouraging people to take a step toward helping themselves, make sure that all of the options for treatment and housing are known, and so that people can make decisions for themselves. And it's about multiple conversations. It's not something that's going to happen just after one meeting in a park or something like that. So we have a long way to go.
Okay, we have some questions that are for our city council candidates. So these are the candidates for the 2 at-large seats on the Seattle City Council. And the first one is about renters. The U District has the highest concentration of renters anywhere in the city, and the Roosevelt neighborhood continues to grow due to the new light rail station. Please talk about how you plan to increase housing for individuals making between $44,000 and $90,000, roughly 40 to 80% of the area median income. In other words, someone working full-time at minimum wage up to the average wage of a teacher. And so, Sarah Nelson, let's start with you, and we'll go down, and then I have another question for the council candidates. We'll work back this way, okay?
Hello, everyone. You know, this neighborhood has changed a lot since I went to school. I'm going to tell you what years, 1990 to 97 is when I got my PhD. There was one tower that was standing in this neighborhood. Anyway, my legislation to allow for the construction of workforce housing in the Stadium District will generate 500 units that are guaranteed to be affordable at 60 to 90% area median income, because that is the underlying zoning requirement. And my opponent oppose that. So we have got to use every single legislative tool that we have to be able to expand the amount of workforce housing, exactly what you're talking about. And so this past week, Council also just approved the update to the multifamily tax exemption program, which also is the only program in the city that generates workforce housing. So this is the legislative tool that we've got to create more of that housing. It is privately developed, but is compensated through a property tax break on the developers. That program has to be protected so that people will participate and expand that housing. I know that there is discussion about, well, the rents were set too high, et cetera. The point is, every single thing that we can do to incentivize the construction of housing for people that fall within this income is necessary, because the housing levy only provides housing for people from 0 to 60% of area median income. That leaves too many people out in our city, and there have to be additional options. Sorry.
It's okay, I think I'm Yeah, so I do want to clarify that in particular with the workforce housing, that was a zoning change to industrial lands that was opposed by a bipartisan coalition of statewide legislators, of farmers, of the port, and many other folks, and that is currently in court right now. When it comes to housing, too many people in our city are living rent burdened at every level. So that means paying more than 30% of their income on rent, particularly when you start to look at the fact that additionally childcare is incredibly expensive and transportation is incredibly expensive. That is part of the reason why I was a big proponent of supporting our social housing developer. So on council, that's going to be something I will focus on, making sure that that is successful. This is important because it is an opportunity to ensure that people are paying no more than 30% of their income in rent, so they are stable and they can remain housed in the same place for a period of time, whether or not their income changes. So for me, that is one of the most important things that we can do to actually address affordability. On top of that, we have to make sure that we are continuing to make progress and making it easier for folks to build housing. That is something that we absolutely agree on. I think we actually should have gone further in the comprehensive plan when it comes to zoning opportunities so that we have more spaces to build housing. I am a big believer that abundance is one of the ways that we can contribute to affordability across the board. So that means making it easier to build housing. That means housing in more and diverse places so that we're not just limiting it to very small pockets around the city, which then can sometimes contribute to displacement, particularly when we're talking about building in areas that are low income and where you have a lot of development pressure.
Thank you for this question. I'm currently the only renter on Seattle City Council, and I hold that as a badge of honor, but also mindful that we are a majority renter city, and so not having that equitable renter representation is challenging for me, so I try and really center on a lot of the perspective that I have in that. And when I actually was waiting tables, I lived here in the U District and was surviving on tips and taking the 32 bus all the way over to Lower Queen Anne to get to my waitressing gig every day, and then taking 3 buses to get to my other job all the way down in City of Lakewood. I've spent a lot of time in the Federal Way Transit Center. So this question feels really personal because I know during my time living in the U District, it was a struggle. And luckily I was able to get by because of our minimum wage laws. But what I'm thinking about now on council, how I can champion the perspective of renters, I was proud to champion a suite of amendments to the comprehensive plan that we worked on alongside the Complete Communities Coalition, a broad coalition of some of our greatest minds in housing, and to open up more housing opportunity in more neighborhoods. I've been proud to work alongside our Office of Housing to make sure that all of our investments through the Seattle Housing Levy are successful and moving forward. And I also passed legislation this year called our Roots to Roofs pilot legislation, which will make it easier for more community-led affordable housing developers to build more housing. I think it's also important to note, again, the social housing developer represents a really important opportunity to build another kind of housing, more publicly owned housing, and have been working alongside, and I think there's a lot we can learn from the North Seattle College Affordable Housing Project and opportunities to partner and have social housing nearby universities and schools to support school communities.
Great. And Rachel, if you want to answer this question, and then I'm going to give you another one to work back this way so you can keep the mic, okay?
I just want to touch on the last question about resistant.
Absolutely.
People that are resistant to go inside, law enforcement. This is why we need to start arresting for misdemeanor crime. We need to amend the public drug use law to allow for arrest. Drug addiction is the only health condition that causes people to commit crimes, burglaries, theft, prostitution, drug dealing, and open-air drug use. So arrest and then offer jail or treatment, or one of the 70% that aren't from here, a bus ticket home. So I'm a Republican. I have the spine and the guts to actually implement these laws.
Okay, this is taking your time from
Yes.
this question. Do you want to touch on how to have
Yes,
more
I do.
results?
So my new idea, I'm definitely for the MFTE program. I think it's great. I think we need to build more studio apartments. This encourages builders to build. My new idea is the fill the gap. This is for anyone minimum wage that's paying more than 30% of their wages in rent, that the city fills that gap and for a studio apartment. The great thing about this is we could start it tomorrow. And it's flexible. So when the market changes and the economy changes, which it will, the economy is going to change when we start arresting people for public drug use and we get them to go to treatment by using law enforcement. Our businesses are going to come back. Our streets are going to be safe. Our parks are going to be safe. Our public transit is going to be safe. And we're going to be able to create jobs and wealth and prosperity for our city. The other thing is my opponent wants to tax the heck out of everybody to pay for these free apartments for drug addicts with no requirement for treatment. That's going to run business out of Seattle. Those who can leave will.
Okay.
Thank you.
Rachel, keep the mic. I'm going to ask you another question on a
great.
separate topic, again, for the council candidates. City voters passed a transportation levy in 2024 to fund our city's transportation infrastructure with respect to neighborhoods that have a light rail station, like the U District and Roosevelt. Talk about how you would prioritize funding from the levy to improve pedestrian safety, and talk about one project that you would support.
Great. Well, I have two ideas for protecting safety, besides everything I've just told you about amending the public drug use law and getting people into long-term treatment, whether they're mentally ill or severely addicted. I think we should work with Sound Transit to man the fare gates at the stations. This will help with public safety immensely and keep the funding going to our public transportation as well, so we don't need as much levy to tax people. I think the city of Seattle, they're tired of being taxed and not getting their basic needs met, public safety. So these manned fare gates, if you have someone at the fare gate, they're going to be able to see if somebody's having a medical emergency, if they're intoxicated, if they're having a mental health, psychotic episode, and they're going to be able to get on the horn and call and get them help right away before they ever get on the light rail station or the train. We cannot have any more bus drivers murdered, any more light rail murders on the light rail or on the train. This does not have to happen in our city. And also, I want to fund a Seattle Police Department transit force. So when you're on a Seattle City bus in the city of Seattle, there's going to be police on that bus. So you're not going to be inhaling any fentanyl smoke. You're not going to be worried if you're going to get stabbed in the neck by somebody who's severely mentally ill. What's happening now is cruelty. We need to give the severely mentally ill and the drug addicted long-term treatment. It's not their fault that they're out there committing violence and committing crimes. We need to be responsible as a city, and I believe we can do that. I will do that on the city council.
Okay, and Alexis, now back to you, okay?
Thank you. So I'm also the only car-free person on Seattle City Council, and so I proudly represent the now 20% of Seattle households that don't own a car. So I rely on walking around, taking bus, taking light rail to get where I need to go. Now that decision is by choice to not have a car, and I can live my life that way. That is not always in the cards for everybody, but also there are many households who can't afford to have a car. And so I try and center my perspective as someone who's car-free when thinking about our transit investments and safer streets. And so too many pedestrians, we're talking about people, are harmed in our right-of-ways. we have not made the progress that we have needed to on Vision Zero. It's a design issue. We need to be focusing on traffic calming measures and addressing the dangerous crossings that we know are real. I know we've lost several of our neighbors this year because there was not a safe place to cross a dangerous intersection. And so I'm really excited how in the transportation levy, I know there will be a Vision Zero project on 50th Street here in U District that I think is really exciting that we want to focus on. And then also a Greenway project on 42nd that will be tremendously important, and I believe SDOT's going to be taking that up really soon, which is really exciting. And lastly, I'd highlight outside of the transportation levy, Rapid Ride J coming online. We want to make sure that we're doing everything we can as a city to keep that project on timeline so we can deliver on it. And lastly, I'd note, I'm proudly supported by and endorsed by the Transit Riders Union, the Urbanist, and our Bus Drivers Union because they know that this is a policy area that I take seriously and I've prioritized even in my 11 months on council. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for this question. So I live in between two of what are the most dangerous traffic streets in our city. So that's Rainier Avenue and MLK. Other ones that are dangerous are Aurora and 4th Avenue. But when I think about the need to make sure that we are making that the investments from the transportation levy deliver, there's a couple things that come up for me as incredibly important as somebody running citywide. So one is to remember that we have several light rail stations where we have at-grade crossings. Those are in South Seattle, and we see a lot of both pedestrian people accidents as well as car accidents that actually are not just harmful to the individuals that are involved in them, but also slow down the delivery of our transportation system. So making sure that we are actually delivering on things that are in the transportation levy, like the Othello Healthy Street and like the project that Sound Transit is now taking up to look at pedestrian improvements at those at-grade stations is something that I believe can deliver not just for people who are in South Seattle, but for people who are all across the city when we have a healthier, better functioning transportation network. Looking at the transportation levy investments in particular, I would also say, there is money that is in for a 12th Avenue connection to Roosevelt, making sure that that project is actually successful. And then lastly, I'll say that I'll echo the Rapid Ride investments. We have to make sure that our buses are actually successfully connecting with our light rail so that people are going to take up and be able to use that service. So we'll have an opportunity to look at more expansions there with the Seattle Transportation Measure next year.
Raise your hand if you're from Roosevelt, from the Roosevelt Neighborhood Association. All right, well, shout out to you because if I'm not mistaken, it was Jim O'Halloran in one of the Roozies who coined the phrase YIMBY, when the stations were being located for Link Light Rail, and their argument was to concentrate growth around the stations, and it worked, and the planners ended up listening to you, and so this is what we have to do more of. The people who live in the neighborhood know what will work best, and my responsibility first as a policymaker is that we deliver on the promises that we make in voter-approved measures, and also take into account their input while we are planning those projects and seeing them through. As for the University District, I understand that Brooklyn 43rd and 42nd have been designated as green streets. I do support the pedestrianization of 42nd. If that is, there was a pilot project last summer, and I would need to see the data for that, but find out how that went and then support that as well. I understand also that the neighborhood is interested in pedestrianizing the Ave, keeping the zoning at the level that it is right now to keep it a unique neighborhood and then pedestrianize it. When I think about all the growth that has happened on this street just to the west, the blocks just to the west, it really is true that when you have additional growth, open space is very important, and there is not an ability to make that happen right now along the right-of-way necessarily, but allowing for pedestrian environments is extremely important.
Thank you. I really appreciated the precise details, the projects that you gave a shout out to. I think that's great to understand. So this is a question for all the candidates. I'll start with Sarah Nelson. This is the association's writing. We're particularly concerned with the vacancies in the U District, such as the storefronts that formerly housed CVS, Target, Jack in the Box, because of their large footprint. There are large lots in the Roosevelt neighborhood that have remained untouched for years. The biggest challenges from these vacancies include vandalism and folks sleeping rough in front of the storefronts or in the lots. These challenges detract from the vibrancy of our neighborhood and have real impact on street level safety. What tools will you deploy to reduce the number of vacancies in our neighborhoods, and what interventions do you have in mind to address the ongoing safety and hygiene concerns for those people?
I have a responsibility to deliver the basic services that are spelled out in the city charter, and I take an oath to protect the safety, well-being, and health of my constituents. And so we, instead of looking first at what will we do about the vacancies, why are there vacancies to begin with? And we have a responsibility to improve public safety across the city, but it is true that the things that I can control is improve public safety in the University District and other neighborhoods so that the vacancies do not increase. That's the first thing that we need to pay attention to. Also, expanding access to the to addiction treatment, which is contributing to the public safety and the vacancy problem itself. Now let's go to the vacancies. One thing that I understand is that these lots, it's true, can be used differently to showcase some of the work that the neighborhood has already been. Let me start again. In the Roosevelt District, there is a request to use the fences surrounding some of these big vacant lots as places where art by local people can be shown off. That is art that by artists that don't have to compete for the grants and other public art places around our city. That is the perfect place to beautify these spaces, enliven them, also bring attention to our local art scene while we are still on the other side looking to recruit businesses and improve the conditions of those neighborhood spaces so that they are filled in with small businesses and remain vacant no more.
Yeah, so when I decided to run for city council, I knew that I had the experience of being a nonprofit executive, a parent, an educator, a policy advisor, but not of being a small business owner. So I was really intentional about reaching out to small business owners and asking questions about what we could do to support them and what was happening. And this question of vacancies has come up a number of times. And one of the things that I've heard very clearly is a discrepancy between, and I'm glad you brought up the sort of big box stores, but a discrepancy between the sizes of these vacant lots and the sizes that these businesses would need those spaces to be in order to operate successfully in them. So in other words, if you've got 2,000 square feet and it's incredibly expensive and there's no incentive for that property owner to make that location smaller and more accessible, it is out of reach for cost for a lot of small business owners. So I believe one of the things we need to do is work on actually making, whether it's changes in our building code, whether it's using something like a vacancy tax, which we'd have to work on the state on, or whether it's tenant improvement funds that are available to small businesses so that they can actually make those spaces down to a size that will work for them. I think that is one of the ways that we can actually increase access to those spaces and ensure that they are not just activated, but that they are thriving. I've also been digging into the Seattle Restored program, which I do think is an excellent start. And I've heard a lot of feedback from businesses about changes we can make as a city to make sure that that program works better for them. In particular, making sure that those leases are longer and that they have a little bit more of a runway so they know that they can expect to be in a space for 12 months or longer. So that's based on feedback that I've heard from businesses, and I'm excited to continue talking to people to look at more opportunities to make those changes.
Right, since I saw we had folks raise their hands as a part of the Roosevelt Neighborhood Association, thank you all for inviting me on your monthly walk where you're doing community stewardship and picking up trash. I went on a community walk alongside the Roosevelt Neighborhood Association to talk about dangerous crossings, street safety, but also I really want to thank you all for highlighting just the pervasiveness of some of the vacant lots and expressing your desire and prioritization to see how we can activate those spaces and see what we can do to incentivize more development on them. I'm happy to share I've been in conversation with our state delegation around what the opportunities are for a vacancy tax this year in the state legislative session, and I see we have small business folks in the room. Would love to make sure we're championing small business perspective when we're talking about doing that kind of legislation right. And those conversations are just beginning. State legislative session is starting in just a couple of months, and so we have some time to really think through what we want to ask of the state when we're talking about moving forward with something like this. this. We need to find ways to incentivize activation of public spaces. I'm a supporter of the Seattle Restored program and have been trying to learn carefully from how we've seen some of the participants in that program, and we've seen some good activation in spaces on Lake City Way, which I think we can certainly learn from. But I also think it's important to note that we need to find ways to lower the cost to do business without compromising on workers' wages. And this is where the Seattle Shield Initiative comes in, because the Seattle Shield Initiative will actually lower small businesses' tax obligation to the city, leaving aside more money for businesses. We've learned that it could actually equate to about a month of commercial rent for a number of businesses that they'll be able to help keep their doors open.
My opponent's never run a business. She's never signed a lease for a business. She's never had to protect herself from the mentally ill and the severely addicted running the streets with no law enforcement. So to bring business back to the neighborhood, we must have the basic law enforcement. And she's on the city council. Why don't you do something? You're there. You could actually introduce legislation rather than increasing taxes and giving a bribe to the small businesses. The small businesses want safety. They want to be able to know, if I sign a lease on this empty building, I'm not going to get attacked. I can have employees that are going to be safe. So we must have the basics. My opponent will not say she will arrest for misdemeanor crimes. Misdemeanor crimes kill businesses. They not only kill the business itself through theft, people sleeping in front, people lying on the sidewalk, people using drugs in front of the businesses. It makes people not want to come down. Nobody wants to come and shop. Their families aren't safe. They are not safe. They're not, and the businesses are closing left and right. So I have the spine to do what needs to be done, because I've done there. She couldn't last 1 week in doing a business on Capitol Hill or in the U District with severely mentally ill and drug addicted coming to her door every day. I would challenge you to do it. And
Okay.
you think that's funny?
If
I have to
people-
hire private security because the cops cannot do their job, because they're not allowed to arrest for public drug use and for the crimes associated with addiction. You know, we have armed guards, 7 of them, at our QFC on Broadway. Armed guards. We never used to have that before when we allowed the police to do their job.
Okay,
So
if
I
people-
will. Thank
If
you.
people make specific claims about their opponent's records, we want to let people respond if they need to. But I'd kind of like to keep the conversation moving, if that's okay. But if you do feel like you need to respond, we can give 30 seconds to each person to kind of delve into that. All right. Mayor Harrell, I'd like to put the question to you, if that's okay, and then to Katie.
Left out, by the way.
Yeah, I know, I'm sorry, and thank you for your patience. We're going to actually focus on the mayoral candidates for a while now. So if you want to talk about vacancies, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Well, the first thing, how we approach it. If you were on my executive team, I'd ask, what's working in other cities to make sure that we don't have the vacancies? What's working? And then I'd ask, I required all of my executives to read the book Abundance by Ezra Klein, and says, then what's new? What can we do that no one is doing? What is our role? The first thing our role is to be to plan. So when you look at some businesses like downtown Seattle as an example, where the Triple Doors or Wild Ginger, we upzoned areas to have residential allotments such that we can build to make sure we get better foot traffic. So planning is the critical, and if you look at our comp plan, how we built around neighborhood centers, we came up with a new idea to stimulate the areas. Number 2, we have to find out whenever a business leaves, like the Cheesecake Factory or Fred Meyer or Starbucks or Nike's, we have to do a deep dive with them to see, what do you need? Public safety is first and foremost, and that's why I'm so bullish on public safety. The good news is we're getting about 10 applications a day, over thousands per year, and we should be fully staffed by my second term, and this is a good thing. The other piece of that is, how do you stimulate the market? So our B&O tax policy that Councilmember Mercedes Rinks talked about is a great, when Amazon profited $60 billion last year and Microsoft profited $80 billion last year, they can pay. And so the third part of that is, how do we assist small businesses? And if you look at what we've done, we are on the cutting edge of supporting small business. We have, for example, in addition to the Storefront Repair Fund, we have the Business Community Ownership Fund, where we leverage $20 million of private capital to support small business. I have to stop there.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, vacancies. So, we know that vacant commercial properties contribute to kind of a downward spiral in neighborhoods. And, Roosevelt and the U District are two examples. There are many more around the city that, as I've been talking with business owners, small business owners, and residents, this is clearly a problem around the city. So, I'm going to echo, I think, a little bit of what Dion and Alexis both said in terms of I definitely support a vacancy tax, a well-designed vacancy tax. I think we might actually be able to do that at the city level without new state authorization, but definitely if we need the state, obviously we should be pushing them. And to some extent, I think we need to take this on a case-by-case basis and really understand property by property, what are the obstacles to development, what are the obstacles to activating that space. So that's going to be conversation with the property owner, with folks in the surrounding community, and really figuring out what needs to happen, right? Is there a way that we can activate that space in partnership with a nonprofit, or what is the obstacle? Obviously, homelessness and public safety issues are part of it, and I think more meaningfully addressing our homelessness crisis will begin to help with this problem. Definitely support the Seattle Restored program and have been having, I think, similar conversations to Dion and Alexis with folks who've been through that program and who have ideas about how to improve it. So in general, the more that we can do to support small businesses, make it easier to start and expand a small business, I think we can begin to activate some of this vacant space.
Great. Feel free to hang on to that microphone. So we have a couple questions for the mayoral candidates now. Even as we upzone our already dense neighborhoods, housing development costs continue to rise, which creates upward pressures on rent. Do you support increasing height limits in urban centers such as Roosevelt above 6 floors to incentivize development and lower per unit cost? What do you see as the biggest barriers to permitting and developing new housing, and how would you address those barriers?
Yeah, this is a great question, and the comprehensive plan proposal that came down from our current mayor and that the council passed, I believe it doesn't go far enough in allowing the private market to build more housing around the city. I'm a renter. I'm definitely feeling the rapidly rising rents of the last few years, and part of the reason why we have this housing crisis, why home prices, why rents are so expensive, is that our housing production has not kept pace with the growing population of our city and our region. Not saying that allowing more development is the only answer, because we know that that is not going to automatically create affordability for lower income folks. But yes, I do support increasing height limits in that area around the light rail station. And I believe that there's more that we can do to streamline permitting and design review to make some of these projects pencil out better. Also, obviously, there are factors outside of our control having to do with macroeconomics and obviously Trump's tariffs. There are lots of factors that have meant that our permit applications have really tanked. And so this is definitely worrying, as it looks like Washington is one of the states that is kind of heading into a recession. And this is what makes it so important that we're also investing publicly in social housing, in affordable housing, and that we're actually creating those opportunities for kind of counter-cyclical investment that can keep our construction workers at work, and that can create those jobs and also create that housing in this time where the private market isn't doing great. So we can both make it easier for the private market to build, and we can do that public investment.
Great. And over to you, the question about height limits and barriers to housing.
Very interested in that. I had the unenviable task of actually deciding what the comp plan would look like. We proposed 330,000 units, which was very aggressive. The former plan only allowed 160,000 units, so we over doubled that capacity, and we went through our 84 square miles to determine where we thought growth made sense. And to continue our discussion with all of you, I initiated a supplemental EIS to keep the discussion going, to see where we got it right and where we could improve. It's as simple as that. I try to use a lot of data when I argue points. Maybe it's the lawyer in me. Under our administration, we have actually built 50,000 units. 50,000. That is unprecedented. No mayor has achieved that. We achieved 8,000 affordable units. Under the levy that you helped me pass, that I used relationship capital to pass at $970 million, we will keep 9,000 people in their homes who could face homelessness. We will build another 3,100. And under my second term, we will spend another $1 billion toward affordable housing. What the city's role should be is to make sure that we can save money, like in the Burgermaster process, the Cortera project. There's going to be 800 units there, 200 of which are restricted. We cut down the permit time by 2 years. And under our permit and customer trust initiative that we have in the city to speed up that design review and speed up the permit process by 50 to 75%, and we are measuring it through what we call a permitometer matrix to make sure that's what we can do to make sure we're cutting the red tape. And we're doing a great job. We've made great progress in that regard.
Thanks. Okay, another question for you. Please talk about how you would respond to the Trump administration sending the National Guard to Seattle. How would you support businesses that are being targeted by the DOJ due to being deemed as part of the, quote, radical left?
So we, Seattle, should be proud that we are actually leading the way in this discussion. That the law that we have proposed and the executive order that I recently issued, no other city has done it. Number one, we are taking them head on. And we're saying, number one, you cannot enforce ICE activities on public property. You cannot wear masks. You have to be conspicuously marked. You heard the chief of police that I hired say that he is prepared to go to jail to fight for immigrant and refugees. For me, it's very personal because my mother was put in a concentration camp because of an executive order, 9066. I'm prepared to fight. If you look at my executive order again, when I was threatened to be put in jail for being a welcoming city, I said, well, we have 140,000 people here in this city that identify as foreign-born. They're not undocumented. They have rental agreements, mortgages, driver's license. They have a lot of documents, and they are tax-paying, law-abiding human beings that deserve their due process rights. So we will lead the way. I talked to the mayors around the country on this issue. We also met with the community-based organizations. I upped the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs budget by 70%. There are legal services and advocacy services and workforce development for that organization, and I hired Hamdi Mohammed, who was a champion in this space. So Seattle, we should participate in the No Kings rally today and hear our voices loudly on our First Amendment rights, and we should continue to lead the way and protect who we are here in the city of Seattle.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate the mayor's leadership on the recent executive orders. So first of all, be united, right? And that means the city working closely in partnership with our educational institutions, with our business community, making sure that we're working hand in glove with the county, with the state, and in collaboration with mayors of deep blue cities around the country that are facing similar threats, right? We can learn from DC, we can learn from LA, we can learn from Chicago, and make sure that we're creating space to scenario plan and strategize, and also make sure that among those institutions, our educational institutions, our business community, we are also coordinating on legal strategy, and that the city is coordinating with civil rights, immigrants' rights groups, so that if this happens, we are immediately filing legal injunctions. We are fighting in the courts with everything we've got. So we need to be united. We need to fortify our constitutional shield. And part of this, too, is being careful not to give tools to the feds that we don't have to, right? And so this is one reason why I was very concerned by the recent legislation to expand CCTV camera surveillance around the city in this moment, right? This is legislation that was opposed by civil rights and immigrants' rights groups and by many state legislators for a good reason, because we know that that technology has not been proven to be meaningfully and consistently secured. Also, we need to own the narrative, right? To some extent, the most powerful counter-narrative is a well-governed city. And we need to make very clear that we are not asking for this. We don't need this. So we need to fight with everything we've got. We need to protect our immigrant communities, and we need to stand up together. And we also need to realize that there are limits, right? We have to prepare for the eventuality that they come into our city, and that means coordinating with community groups around the city, making sure that people are protesting peacefully and safely.
Great. Hang on to the microphone. This is a question for all the candidates. The U District faces significant challenges that seem to be related to a drug market operating around the Ave. Please talk about supports and treatment options for individuals with substance use challenges. Additionally, please talk about how you would address the distribution of illicit substances and the violence that accompanies the drug network in the U District. And maybe we have talked a little bit about some of these issues, but if you're able to also maybe raise up something that hasn't been mentioned until now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, this is a really critical issue, and it's one that, the U District is facing. It's also one that my neighborhood, Capitol Hill, is facing, and I know downtown, obviously Little Saigon. So there are a number of areas around the city where we have hotspots of drug use and drug dealing and other kinds of illicit activity that accompany that. And so this is something that really needs to be an urgent focus. I know that here in the U District, the U District Partnership is doing great work addressing the unsheltered homelessness and some of the public safety problems, including drug use that arise from that. So I think continuing and expanding a very close working relationship between the city and the U District Partnership, making sure that we're supporting that work, that we are also partnering with the county, right, in public health, and that we're doing everything we can to expand drug treatment options, and also critically that once someone goes into drug treatment, that we also have that emergency housing, that permanent housing with support that they can go into, right, so that people are not cycling back into the street after treatment. That is really, really critical. One thing that obviously there's an important role for police here, especially when it comes to drug dealing, in making sure that we're breaking up that activity. One thing that I would absolutely do, so community policing. Prior to 2020, we had five officer teams, a sergeant and 4 officers in each precinct doing community policing. From the many officers and former officers that my team has talked to, there's almost universal agreement that going back to that model, even at the current levels of staffing, would be a very good use of police resources. So I would like to reinstate the community policing model, and if it's successful, expand it.
Thank you. Mayor Harrell?
I'm just going to stand up. I'm getting a little stiff here, sitting here. I saw the council members do it. Don't start me yet. I haven't started yet. Okay, so the challenge is the intersectionality between drugs and public safety, a health issue and a public safety issue. Make no mistake about that. We have to make arrests. I mean, full stop. If you look at what we did at 12th and Jackson, we arrest 14 of the most prolific drug traffickers, and we seize $3 million worth of drugs, enough to kill everyone in Seattle twice. That's good police work. But on the other hand, we realize people are killing themselves. They have a health problem, health addiction. And you look at, under our leadership, we've tripled our investments, for example, in the fentanyl crisis, and we've reduced deaths almost by 30%. We were the first city in the nation to have our first responders administer buprenorphine as an example. Other cities are now following our lead. We created the care department, which is an unarmed response. The largest city to have this significant kind of care response, such that we deal with people in mental crisis. We don't need a gun and badge. We need them to get help. The good news is, with the Care Crisis Center opening up, the Orca Center that we invested in, the Star Center, the challenge we had is there were nowhere to take these places. We can arrest them, they get in and out of jail, they're not getting the help. So we're very thankful now we are online to have places where we could take people. Number one, you have to understand something. I grew up on these streets in Seattle. A lot of these people that are struggling are people that I grew up with. I have no desire, and I took some hits on this when I said, I'm not trying to arrest someone that's killing themselves. I'm trying to get them help. I don't want them in and out. But on the other hand, I have to protect you as well. And that's what an executive does, and that is exactly our approach. And it's a best practice, by the way.
So I don't want to see people be arrested and go in and out, some kind of revolving door. That's why my plan is to build first temporary long-term residential treatment for the drug addicted and the mentally ill, and then build permanent and out of the city neighborhoods. No longer do I want the industry of downtown to be these failed housing first buildings with wraparound services that people can choose to take or not, and many of them choose not to take them, and then they can continue to commit crimes, stealing, selling stolen merchandise, using drugs in public. And the difference is, we can do this at a local level, and the difference is, I've walked away from the Democratic Party because I'm tired. Aren't you tired of everything still being the same and getting all these promises? I got tired. I walked away from the Democratic Party. I joined the Republican Party. And I am the one on the city council who will be willing to work with the federal government. Why? Because if we change the executive order that President Trump just put down, if we change the way we treat drug addiction, and we must, we will get federal funding. The federal funding will not be cut. I'm the one that will work with the federal government and make sure we get the funding. Not only on drug addiction, but also all we have to do is stop discriminating. and follow civil rights law. Stop the discrimination of diversity, equity, inclusion. That's discrimination. It's against the law. And stop being a sanctuary city. I'm for legal immigration, but I'm against illegal immigration. And a lot of legal immigrants are actually against illegal immigration too. They're tired of people jumping the line. So I asked Bruce Harrell, Mayor Bruce Harrell, actually, if he was willing to change and walk this back. I might be able to convince him on the Seattle City Council.
You know, I loved my time living in this neighborhood for so many reasons. And someone used to deal right behind my apartment. And that was a reality that I also lived with. And so two big things when we're talking about meeting this issue, major issue, with a focus on trying to make sure people get the support they need, but we're also disrupting major cycles. And so two big things on this. We need to right-size our first responder system. I've been a big proponent for making sure that we build a public safety system that has a quick response and the right response for given public safety scenarios. I think that's really important. And so I've been a huge proponent of also right-sizing our alternative response system. So a huge supporter for the CARE team, as some of the folks up here have spoken to, but there was a recent article in the Seattle Times that highlighted something about the CARE team. And when we have an analysis of all the call types that have come in, there are 7 different call types representing 47,000 calls that almost never result in law enforcement action. But our CARE team is only allowed to respond to 2 of those 7 types of calls. So we're talking about hundreds of police hours that could be better spent disrupting trafficking instead of responding to some of these things. So I think there are some major policy. We need to address that kind of response shift in policy to make sure that we are making the most efficient use of our resources and disrupting that. But I've also been a huge proponent for making sure that we have the resources that we need to help folks in their recovery. And so I have a track record of fighting on the state level to make sure that we have those resources. I've been a champion for our crisis care centers, so there's an entryway into the system, as well as expanding treatment options on the local level and making sure we have the funding to do that.
Yeah, thank you for this really important question. And I'll say I wholeheartedly agree with Councilmember Rink on this first part about expanding what the CARE team is able to respond to so that we are able to have SPD focus on the things that SPD should be focusing on, trafficking, drug crimes, et cetera. To expand on that and just to not repeat it, the other thing I think is really important is place-based interventions that work. So, I live in a neighborhood that had a place-based intervention to deal with drug dealing, and it brought together providers, SPD, a university research project, and it worked. And there are providers right now that are working on trying to institutionalize a model called the Neighborhood Impact Framework that brings together providers, it brings together law enforcement, and it brings together small businesses and community-based organizations so that there's clarity on what's happening. Because we know that when you're in the neighborhood and you're at that sort of street level, you know a lot of information, and coordination and making sure that that information is provided back to the appropriate people for treatment and the appropriate people for law enforcement intervention is incredibly important. The third thing that I will speak to is making sure that when we talk about treatment, that we are investing in treatment options that are going to work. There are some treatment options that the city has piloted, and I've talked to providers about them, and what I have heard back is that for their clients who need the most services, those clients have actually been bounced out of those treatment facilities, not because they wanted to leave, but because the treatment facilities are not actually equipped and matched with the needs of those folks. So when it comes to treatment investments, we need to make sure that we are directing them into organizations that are actually able to support people who have the most acute and co-occurring mental health and substance use needs.
Can you please repeat the question?
It's talking about the drug market operating around the Ave. Please talk about supports and treatment options for individuals with those challenges and how you would address the distribution of illicit substances and violence that can accompany a drug network.
All right, well, this is my lane here. I have been focused on expanding access to on-demand addiction treatment since day one. I've already spoken to that. I am very proud that over the summer the council unanimously passed a resolution that staked claim to 25% of new revenue coming forward from the public safety tax for addiction treatment, recovery-based services within permanent supportive housing, stabilizing existing services such as LEAD, etc. All this might sound gobbledygook. Here's what I want to tell you. This is stuff that I have taken a leadership role on, and I'm not going to stop on that. Obviously, addiction is inextricably linked to homelessness and public safety issues, and I'm the person that has been focused on getting the city's attention right where it needs to be. That's the only way we're going to really be able to address those two ongoing pernicious challenges. I support U-District Partnership having a dedicated outreach person who they used to have a dedicated person who is then sort of reappropriated by the city and put into the Unified Care Team. That is an issue that I'll be working on in the budget coming forward in the next few weeks. The same thing is true for the Ballard BIA, etc. We have a responsibility to support our business improvement areas with the services that they need to support the residents and small businesses in those neighborhoods. And then I'll finally say that there used to be a floating behavioral health person who could go anywhere in the city and respond to people's behavioral health needs immediately. We're talking about someone with an actual medical professional, because there needs to be a lot more support on that front. We've already discussed, I agree with all the things that my colleagues at the table have said about law enforcement, et cetera, but there are certain niche needs that I am prepared to support in the North End especially.
Okay, thank you. So now we're going to move on to our Never Have I Ever round, and the folks who put this together came up with some fun, intriguing things to run by you and see if these are parts of your experience. And I think the way this is supposed to work is that we're going to ask you each to hold up one hand, and I'm going to read off some of these examples. And if I read an example that applies to you, you put down one finger. And when we get to someone who has all five down, we're going to ask you to just quickly tell us a little bit about one of these experiences and why it rings true for you. So here we go. So, candidates for office in Seattle. Never have I ever cut the line at the ferry. Okay, that's good. Never have I ever been to a Mariners playoff game.
Wait, we put a finger down if we haven't done it.
If you have, right? If you have, yes. I know, I had to ask for help on this. So, never have I ever been to a Mariners playoff game. Has anyone been to a Mariners playoff game? No. Okay. Never have I ever rode my bike in the rain. Okay, there's some are down there. If you have, yeah. So, okay, I'll just switch it up to say, I am someone who has had boba in the U District. Yeah, okay, there we go.
We have had boba in the U District.
Yes, I've had boba in the U District. I've had a Dick's Burger after midnight. Okay, there we go. Let's see. I have gotten stuck on the light rail. Yeah. I have won money at the Emerald Queen Casino. No? No big gamblers here?
I'm out.
You're out?
I
Okay.
lost money too. but-
Okay. So you're the first one to have all five? Is that
Yeah.
right? Okay, so tell us about one of these experiences that we listed just now.
My wife and I went to the fifth. Had the pleasure to go to the 15-inning Mariners game. It was a lifetime experience. I couldn't wait for it to get over, by the way.
Great. Okay, we'll do a few more. Sorry, keep your hands up if you're still going. Are you someone who has crowd surfed at a concert in Seattle? No big surfers? Okay. Are you someone who has gone fishing for salmon? Are you someone who's good? You're out. Okay, tell us about one of these.
Let's see. I came here in 1990, so that will give you some understanding of the music scene here back in the day. And so some of the clubs on Capitol Hill were just starting to get started, and so the crowd surfing was not unusual. Okay, and you can also crowd surf at a Grateful Dead concert. You should know as well. So it's not specific to grunge. But anyway, just last summer I had the opportunity to fish for pinks at the mouth of the Duwamish River. That was really, really, I don't know. It was fun, and I actually caught some.
Nice. Okay, anyone else want to tell us about one of the experiences that we just talked about? Anything? Some of the other ones were, have you ever performed in a play? Have you ever had a child playing a sport or instrument at a Seattle public school? So, anyone want to chime in? Okay. All right. Well, I really appreciate everyone coming out to learn about the issues. This weekend we're going to go to closing statements, and so I think these are a chance to, let's see, sorry. I think just a 90-second, 90 seconds to wrap up and just touch on anything that you really want people to have in mind as we head toward Election Day. And Katie Wilson, would you like to start? And we'll go down this way.
So it's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I'm actually going to use this 90 seconds to make an appeal to our mayor. We have 2 sanctioned tent cities in Seattle, Tent City 3 and Tent City 4. These are self-managed homeless communities. Both of them are scheduled to leave their current host sites within the next couple weeks, and neither one has a new place to go. That means that 200 homeless people in our community are about to have no safe place to sleep. Tent City 4 up in Lake City is on the vacant Lake City Community Center site. There's no construction scheduled there for more than a year, so there's no good reason why they can't stay there, at least for another 6 months. Both of these encampments need a place to go in the next couple weeks. So I would just like to make an appeal to our mayor to do everything in your power to find sites for them to move to. We have the largest unsheltered homeless population per capita here in Seattle. We cannot let that population continue to grow, so please help us to protect the shelter that we already have.
Mayor Harrell?
Well, I have to change my closing now because that offends the thousands of people that are trying to help these people that are unsheltered. That offends the decades of work that council members, and I've had this job for 12 years, the work that we've tried to do to shelter people. And it offends our sense of decency to think that any person in power would not want to house them. And that's the work we're doing. You know, I passed over 1,300 pieces of legislation, and never once did someone challenge me to say that was inhumane. I was the one that championed the ban the box legislation as example. So these people, if they apply for a job, they cannot be asked if they've ever committed a crime. I was the one that championed the race and social justice legislation such that people who are affected most, whether they're sheltered or not, that they are at the table to play a role in our investments and our policy decisions. When we talk about technology, I was the one that had come out with body cameras because I knew my community would be affected the most if they're in a back alley and it's their word against an officer's. I need 4 more years because this is complex work in this city. The entire country is looking at what we're doing here in Seattle. For you young folks, don't think I don't understand your pain. My mom and dad cannot afford to live in this city, and that's why I will put another $1 billion in affordable housing. Understand that. That's why we'll cut through the red tape. That's why my comp plan is so aggressive. I have always supported social housing corporations. The fact is we lost 10,000 jobs in the high-tech sector. That affects our tax base. So if you want a warrior to fight for you, I'm a proven commodity. And make no mistake about this, Trump will walk all over inexperience. We need a warrior is what we need, and that's why I need 4 more years. Thank you very much.
Well, my name's Rachel Savage. Again, I hope you vote for me if you want something different. My opponent is just going to give you more of the same, more drug addicts on the street, more permanent supportive housing, this failed experiment in your neighborhood, in all the neighborhoods in Seattle. She wants to export this, or it might be sanctioned encampments, or it might be tiny house villages with no law enforcement. And, you know, I'm for enforcing law as a compassionate response to intervening. Right now, our city, I believe, is in a codependent relationship with drug addicts, and my opponent has no experience. Now, she's going to call me names and infer that I'm a fascist, that I'm a racist, that I'm an awful person, simply because I disagree with her. But guess what? It doesn't matter. Name calling doesn't work on me because I have suffered the effects of this failed policy. I have suffered every single day. And you might think that I'm not optimistic because I'm always leading with this problem that we can solve very easily. But I am optimistic for our city. I worked downtown in the 90s. It was full. The businesses were full. People were downtown. Families were downtown. People were making money. People could afford apartments in Seattle. I want to bring us back to that place. So I believe that the Republican Party is the party of builders. They're the party that is going to get things done. You can see right now, President Trump is getting things done. We have peace in the Middle East. And can we take a minute to applaud for that? Peace in the Middle East. It's incredible. You know, I've always said I'm willing to work with anybody to solve the fentanyl epidemic and the severe mental illness
Okay, that's the
epidemic in
time-
our town.
time limit.
Democrat, Republican. I hope you keep the same open mind. Thank you.
Great.
I realized I forgot to share in my intro my favorite place in your district, and I just have to shout out quickly, Araya's Place's lunch buffet for $12 has saved me many times. Thank you all for being here this morning. Thank you for continuing to engage in local government. I'm a firm believer that local government is the last line of democracy, which is why we've been working so hard in my office. And this year I was actually honored to receive the greatest honor, I think, of my life so far, which is to be recognized by Real Change as the Change Maker of the Year. And get your paper, by the way, if you haven't gotten your paper yet, please reach out to your local Real Change vendor. But this honor was bestowed because in my office, we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk, and we have been really hard at work. This year, we have passed 4 pieces of legislation. This year, I also walked from the northernmost border of our city to the southernmost border of the city because I have this crazy idea that we should understand the real feel of our streets, dangerous crossings, but also understand what's happening in every neighborhood from a street level view. But I've also been spearheading our fight against the Trump regime by standing up a dedicated committee focused on federal administration and policy changes so we can understand in real time what all of these executive orders mean in real time for the work of our city. And I've shown up myself in immigration court to stand alongside our immigrant families. You know, we got 78% in the primary, and we're continuing to grow our coalition. This is the campaign that every single Democratic Party organization in the city is supporting. This is the campaign that's endorsed by unions representing frontline workers, our teachers, electricians, and bus drivers. And this is the campaign that is supported by Planned Parenthood Alliance advocates because they trust we're going to support reproductive health care access. I'm proud of this coalition. I hope you all will join us in supporting a Seattle that works for everyone. Thank you.
So thank you for organizing this, and thank you for spending your Saturday morning here. You know, I will close with saying I decided to run for city council after years of working behind the scenes. You know, working with groups who were fighting for reproductive access, working for groups who were trying to build new housing for their communities, working with groups who are working to change policy at the state level to make our state and our city function better. And I decided to run because I believe that on council we have the ability to deliver for a city that is actually going to be affordable, to deliver for a city where we can address homelessness through investing in new capacity, to pay attention to the details when we talk about treatment so that we are not investing in services that are actually going to exclude people. And I am running proudly with the support, similarly to Alexis, of every Democratic organization in the city, running proudly with the support of Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, running proudly with the support of King County Prosecutor Lisa Mannion, because they know that what it takes to actually address the challenges that we have right now is, yes, absolutely a fighter, but it is also a collaborator. It is also about bringing an end to the divisiveness that has been in our city and working hand in hand with each other to solve our most pressing problems. We didn't get a chance to talk too much today about the budget, but I will be clear that the outlook is bleak and we haven't even seen the cuts that could come. It is incredibly important that we actually have somebody who's going to fight for progressive revenue so that we have the opportunity to take care of our residents who are going to lose access to Medicaid. They're going to lose access to SNAP. They are going to lose access to Section 8. The city is going to be not just our first, but our last line of defense, and I am proudly running to fight for those people. Thank you.
I'll start right where my opponent left off with progressive revenue. You know, it's hard to tell really how what policy perspectives were different on, because she mentions pretty much many of the programs that I have either championed or helped institute through legislation. But the one difference is progressive revenue. I hear people calling for progressive revenue, but not explaining what will it pay for. What is the problem that we're trying to fix? We have a responsibility to ensure that your resources are being spent wisely, and I commit to doing that. I'm not against progressive revenue. In fact, I voted for it, and it's on your ballot right now. But we have a responsibility to make sure that our resources are being spent right now for the problems that are on our plate. And when I hear people that are running against incumbents talking about the very programs, touting the very programs that the people who've been in office for 4 years, like the Seattle Restored program and so many of the other things that were mentioned today, we did that. And I'm going to keep on delivering those kind of effective programs for you. Permitting, let's talk about permitting. I brought a small group of architects to my committee and asked them, please identify the most pernicious systematic barriers that keep keep you from being able to finish a project on time and get your permits when you need to. Gave me a list, and sure enough, we just passed 2 bills out of council. One was brought down from the executive, one from council, that fixed 2 extremely difficult permitting problems. And that was slowing the construction of housing and also making it difficult for small businesses. Why I'm going on and on about this is because I've spent 4 years working on real problems and solving them. And I ask for your support because we're just getting started. We've made a lot of progress in the past 4 years, but we're just getting going. And I am supported by the people that are focused on what is most important to most constituents, which is restoring more public safety to our, I'm just going to stop that terrible sentence because I just got off on the, anyway, here's who I'm endorsed by. The Amalgamated Transit Union, which is Local 587, 6 of my council colleagues, a whole bunch of electeds, and, right, you get the picture. Go to my website.
Great. Thanks again. I just want to mention that there's a video of today's presentation in case you want to share it with anyone who couldn't make it today, and it's going to be at the U-District Partnership website. udistrictcouncil.org/forum. So you can find it there as well. So thank you so much. Thanks to the candidates for making time for this today.